Alrighty. I think we are good to kick things off. Whole new world right here with this setup. So let's have some fun with it. So I don't really know how full on this is looking per se. But here we are. So let's see what we can do. Alrighty. Get that out of the way. Got some Elmer's glue action. Because I want to set up some bases. An important part of your models, if they have a base, right? Maybe you make a display base, maybe you don't. I don't know, but I'm gonna use Elmer's glue because why not? I'm gonna use some water to thin it down a bit to make it a bit easier. I'm gonna use this scooper, this texture scooper that Citadel had at some point. To do some scooping. So let's see. So the goal, what I want to do is get, if it'll focus on this guy, is to get my bases to this state. It's nothing crazy. It's just some flock down and then some paint to help seal in that flock. I've found, for my own sake, if I don't focus on the base first, at least get get the stuff on the base and get some type of color down to seal it, I'll not work on it when I should be, and that presents problems later. So let's see if I can't figure out how to do this. What I have is this Shadow Cat does have flock down, and it got a little bit of the base coat of the mech on it. Not a big deal because I'll be changing things anyway. This Elemental also has some of the primer coat on it, and with some blocking stuff. And I even have a Space Marine. What's he doing here? This Space Marine is not finished at all. I actually have to work on it. Maybe it'll happen here. Probably won't. But I gotta put the flock in amongst the bare the bare places of its base. All right. My throat is completely fine until I hit live, and then it's deciding to do this, as is customary. So let's get to it. I also have 4 other clan light Omnimex that I own. They're actually all of the light mechs. This thing is a fire moth up here, if you couldn't tell. And then we have a kit fox, a cougar, a mist lynx, and an adder. And I'm going to make sure that their base is ready to go too. I just find getting the bases to a point where they're pretty good to go. It just helps it feel more like progress is being made, and in general gets me kind of motivated to do more. So I'm gonna put a little bit of water down. By a little bit, I mean probably a lot of bit of water here. Doesn't really matter. I don't have any real rigid science here. And honestly, if I had thin super glue, that could be the better play. But I like Elmer's glue or just PVA glue if you want to get technical and not name brand. Although, whatever. I like this glue. Uh, Ease of use, simplicity. Dropping it and making a mess is also nice. But what I like about it is, if it'll come out, is that it does a pretty good job of holding the flock to the base. Like, it's not going to be as solid as some other glues out there, but like, we're not trying to make some crazy super permanent fixture here, because I'm not drop kicking the models with their base, through like windows or anything like that. It's just putting some flock down, some sand. Really, it's just modeling sand. But it's old flock from GW, so it's the green modeling sand stuff. It's just what I have. I've had this stuff for well over a decade, so I might as well use it. I think the scaling will be fine. One thing to keep in mind in doing bases is scaling to a degree. So I'll take the Space Marine and do it first, where I'll use this a little bit, and then eventually I'll get the other tool, and I'll start. I usually do this to clean off the mixer, if you will. But this isn't exactly what the tool is for. The tool is more for texture paints and things of that nature. But this has got that kind of somewhat consistency-ish, maybe. So, in this case, since I have stuff down on the base, I'm trying not to get it on the rim of the base. This paint isn't super paint. This isn't paint. This glue isn't super durable. So even if you did get some glue on the side of the base, you didn't notice it, and you got base and material, like your modeling sand, your flock, whatever, on the side, you can kind of scrape it off pretty easily enough. So that's always good, because you're going to have cases where you have to do some cleanup, which is one of the reasons I do like using it. I'm going to put a little bit up on this cork, just so the cork isn't oddly absent of detritus and gravel or whatever, however I paint it up. So let's go ahead and apply that on this here doohick. The other nice thing about the Elmer's glue, white glue, PVA glue, whatever you want to call it, because you can get it in clear, I know, so I guess white glue isn't technically accurate enough. But the nice thing about it is it has a decent work time. It's not like super glue where it's going to instantly cure and you're kind of screwed if you take a little bit too long. So having that good work time, we'll definitely get it in that crevice and around this crevice here. Means you can really load up the base how you want it, massage it in line, and then put it in the flock. Now this is on a holder, and this Citadel holder, I mean, you can probably find something for cheaper, but it does a really good job. It's actually pretty strong, so I don't want to take the model or the base off of this thing unless I really absolutely need to, because it's just annoying to have to kind of force it back onto this thing, which, if I could keep it in frame, which is pretty good for the purposes of, that means it's a pretty strong bond, so I can't complain there, or not bond, but pretty strong holder. So can't super complain, but it does make it annoying when you have to take it off for things. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a scooper dip, if that makes any sense. So I have my really old, I mean, you can see it's got the old picture and everything on it, modeling flock, and I even have it taped because at one point a decent amount spilled out because it just opened up, which wasn't fun. So we're gonna do sacrilege, and we're gonna go bottoms up or top down almost, try to scoop it on, or we can. I don't have a little scooper. We can use our fingers to kind of dangle it over and just liberally drop this all over the base, and then kind of tap it to get it back into the container. Because the drawback of being on something like this is that you can't just sit it into the modeling flock and have it submerge itself and be easy. So we got to make a bit more of a mess here. You can also do this over like a wax paper, because wax paper, the stuff won't stick to it at all, the flock, and you can make it more of a mess and then just turn the wax paper into a semi-funnel and put it all back in there. But this worked out pretty well. As you can see, I got it coated. What I want to do now is let this fully dry, then take it over a wastebasket, a trash can or outside, and then I just use my breath and I blow over the flock to kind of blow off any strays. You don't want to be too aggressive with it. It's just PVA glue, but for being on camera, I'll probably just do it. I have over a plate or whatever instead. Once it's fully dry, so we can move on to the next step. But we don't want it to all come off. We just want whatever's not secure by the glue well enough to kind of flake off, give us a little bit more variance and randomness, and then we can put paint on after that. So that's a spaceman model with a fairly big base. These two things already have their bases locked, which leaves us these 4 light mechs. And I'll start with why not? Let's start with the mist links. Okay, so the thing about these BattleTech models, these Force Pack models, is that they come already affixed to their base. If you wanted to, you could carefully kind of like separate them from their base and then put whatever you want down on the base, maybe some cork, another material, and then carefully glue this back down on top of that. And that's cool. I've done stuff like that before to other things, not BattleTech stuff. But I don't want to do that. At least not for these light mechs. They're a bit more animated, like this thing's running with a torso twist. And therefore I want it to be on a level surface, and then I put it on the cork, it's going to sit high. It's not going to be as easily bonded to the cork. You need the super glue for that, and you can make a strong bond, no problem. You can even potentially pin this foot here if you wanted to for extra support, but how about we just leave it alone? And yeah. So that's the play. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm just going to put some glue down. Now I'm going to work with this glue until it starts becoming unusable. That's on the paper plate here. And then I'll just make more. But you could just go straight. I find getting it thin with water makes it a bit easier to work with it. So now we have a trade-off in that this isn't attached to anything, so I got to hold the model and the base to work with it, which is a little bit more annoying to work with to put the glue down. Also, my fingers are in the way, but you kind of get a sense of what I'm doing. I'm just applying the glue to the base. But it'll make it a lot easier, which you'll see with the flock. So, trade-offs. If I had more blue tack on hand, I could blue tack it to a paint pot like the fire moth is here, and then just remove it from the blue tack and put it into the tub here. But I don't want to take the fire moth off and do all that, so we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way of holding it. Nothing wrong with that. Now, if you don't have a tool like this, you don't need it. An old paintbrush that's kind of beat up can work. If you're going to use a paintbrush, use one that's not one of your best. And try to take care of it. Like, don't let the glue, really try to clean it and rinse it off. The nice thing about this is that once the glue fully dries on this, I can peel it off of this kind of rubberized thing. this spatula. But if you're gonna use a paintbrush, I do recommend cleaning the paintbrush. Um, Now I'm really trying to make sure I get the glue absolutely over everything, if I can stay on camera, and then put it into the block because, yeah, having some bare spots, you could be compacted dirt or sand or whatever. It's totally a concept that could be believable, especially on this scale, but I want it to really be as coated as possible for this, personally. I just like that better. All right, so we're fully glued on, or put glued on the base. Now we can just submerge it like this, let it sit in there. And that's super easy. That's why I like these tubs. You can obviously use whatever type of container with modeling sand or just different. What's nice for, depending on your scales, you can have different size grain of sand in here, fine, medium, great, whatever else, and it gives a nice texture. But when you're doing certain scales, like that works really well for like Space Marine stuff and whatever else. But on something like a scale like this, and then we just shake it off and let it dry before shaking the rest off. But on something like this, you gotta be careful with scale. I'm not saying it couldn't work, but you just gotta really keep that in mind. Now, the reason why I like keeping the model in the base for this when I can, outside of it's just super easy, and chances are if you're just starting off, you'd be doing something like this too, and it can still look good, so I have no problem with that, is that the mech, the feet are actually like properly leveled, like the grain of the flock, the sand or whatever. It looks like the foot is stomping into it, not standing on top of it. It's a little extra thing that you may not truly realize is happening, but it pays off. So here's a Kit Fox with his really crazy legs. Um, Super crazy chicken walker style legs there. I like the Kit Fox though. And if you already have pretty thin paint, you could just probably go direct onto, not paint, I always say paint, glue. You could probably just smear it on, or just use it straight from the thing if you really wanted to carefully. But since I did thin it down, it gives it a bit more working time. I shouldn't even say thin it down. I mean, yeah, it is a little bit easier to work with, a little bit thinner to work with, but it's really more dilute, which is going to hurt overall, I think, raw strength, but it's going to be plenty sufficient for what we're doing, right? We're not looking for any strength against shearing or anything like that. We're looking to just get some modeling flock, which is basically painted sand, onto the base. That's all we're looking to do. Nothing crazy. So, with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and have at it. I'm going to have to make, quote unquote, make more. I can already see it's running low, and when you start scraping it down and getting it thinner on your palette, or in this case your plate, it's going to become harder to grab. It's going to start curing itself a bit faster. Now, this is an interesting one because the Kit Fox has a foot that's raised. For the purposes, it's always hard to do this, for the purposes of conveying motion like it's walking. And it has that support underneath the foot to keep the model stable on the base and not just break off. So I understand why it's there, and I'm going to leave it there for two reasons. A, whatever flock builds up around it can kind of look like it's kicking up dirt when it's walking. B, if I want to get really precise with it, once I paint up everything, I can go back in there with Musso Black, which is like your blackest black acrylic you're going to get, more or less. It shows up like a true black, so it's like a void. I'm going to paint that little peg, whatever's left, in that true black. It's such a small amount of thing that when you do it that way, it basically kind of like cloaks it. It doesn't become clear. Obviously, you can't see through it, but you're not drawn to it. It just becomes a void of color there. So you're just going to really focus on the mech and focus on the base, not that little extra little support nub. So that's kind of neat. As such, I really want to try to get the glue under there as best I can, just because we really want it to look like there's stuff down there. Shove it in this here flock, and as you can see, it's no wonder this flock lasts. Like, this is something you don't, once you buy it like this, I haven't had to replace or replenish it, and I've had it since 08, 2008 or so. So quite sufficient, if you will, in regards to longevity of the product there. Don't be too worried if it gets all over the mech a little bit or on the model. Once it's fully dried, we can, we're not going to hit it with shop air or anything like that. We can just blow on it, blow off the sand, clean it off carefully, and we'll be good to go. So, with that said, we have 2 more mechs to do. A little bit more water and glue will do the trick. Probably less water than I put there, honestly. I just eyeball it. There's no ratio that I am going for. And then I just surround it with glue, put the glue over it. Just enough glue. I mean, I'm not worried about the glue, right? It's school glue. It's going to be easy to get more if I need it. And then we just mix her up. I'm going to mix it up with the spatula this time. And it should be plenty sufficient for 2 mechs. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, as the mechs get bigger, it will become a little bit more difficult at times to really get stuff on the base. Maybe using the pick end of something like of this wooden skewer stick, it would be good. Or getting it all loaded up and then scraping it along the base and then putting it in place can be good. But we just gotta work with it. On bigger mechs, you might be more tempted to pluck them off the base, even on the smaller guys if you really wanted to do some extra basing. I think there's aftermarket support in terms of bases. I don't know if there's sculpted or resin cast bases for a hex base like this, but I would have to imagine somebody's got something, or 3D print files, whatever for it. But I don't know, and I'm not looking to do that crazy conversion. Not that it's crazy or difficult. I'm just trying to keep it as base to the kit as you can get. And if something presents itself that would be an easy thing to do, or as I just progress and do more of these and get more accustomed and get a feel for what's going on, I can always do some crazy basing shenanigans. And what's neat also about your crazy basing shenanigans is that, let's say I wanted to at some point later do a special base for this cougar here. I can do that. I'm able to break it off, or carefully, I will be able to carefully separate the model from the base even when it's fully painted and the base is fully based. So it's not like you're 100% locked into this look forevermore if you get inspiration or understanding and capability later on in your collecting. So don't think this is it and you can't do anything else with the base or do a different base. You definitely can. So you're not really fully committed to this if you don't want to be. It's all on you. As Bob Ross says, it's your own little world, right? So with that all taken care of, plop them in the flock. What I like about doing this is, in my opinion, a model miniature on a base really isn't done until you base it. That's how I feel anyway. Especially when they're on a base and they're included with a base like this, or if you put them on a base, right? Especially if it's like a sculpted base, whatever, you really want to paint it up. Even if the model's fully looking good on a base and then the base is just a nice simple black, and unless you're trying to make it disappear or whatever, like the bottle's just floating there, and even then I just feel like you should base that thing. Have it tell a little mini story with how the base is, and have it. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to do some crazy lava, urban rubble, ruins of a factory situation, right? With the space you have, just do something basic: grassland, desert, dirt, urbanish. You can tell a lot just by putting some modeling sand down, some flock down, and base coating it and doing some dry brushes of whatever coloration, and that's it. And then doing the rim of the base to clean everything up can tell quite a story. So here's the adder. I just did the cougar. Now we're up to the adder, the last of the light mechs that I own that aren't already fully painted from like over a decade ago. And I am setting up its base. Thoroughly enjoy the adder prime, 2 ERPPCs on a light chassis. Wakes you up in the morning, right? Like if you're in an engagement and you never encountered an adder before, you just see what looks to be a light mech, you know, hanging back. You might feel emboldened to come after it because, hey, I'm a bigger mech. It's just a light mech. And then it opens up with 2 ERPPCs, and you're like, well, that's not good. Maybe I shouldn't. And then you realize it's a light mech, and it can chase me down, and then you got a fight on your hands. At that point, I feel like it's better try to outgun it, raw aggression to try to beat it, right? In terms of like lore concept, because if you try to get away from it, unless it's not the fastest of light mechs, but depending upon what you are, it probably can keep up and surpass your speed, or at least keep up with you well enough to continue firing its long range projectiles of ERPBCs, which isn't a good day. Isn't a good day if you're the enemy of the adder. Yeah, it has a flamer, but who really cares at that point? Um, it's more so about the craziness of its ERPPCs. And yeah, it has other variants. I don't really care as much about the other variants. I'm more about I'm always about PPCs in general and energy weapons after that. So I'm really a fan of uh, the Adder Prime. As you can see, the glue is kind of peeling back, like almost like you have a release age on here, and you might benefit from rinsing off your mech and the base. But it's glue, so you just gotta just keep adding on more, and eventually it'll level itself out, and whatever release agents will kind of submit to the might of glue, which only means we're gonna have potential variance and undulation in the base, which is good. It gives a sense of depth and interest and whatnot. And we can kind of aggressively scrape it towards the edge here and not have to worry too much. And then we'll just plop it in. And it fell over. No big deal. Plop it in, give it a nice healthy helping of the flock. Wipe off this spatula thing. And we have now, in a very basic sense, but still in short order, based our light mechs. Nothing crazy, but it's going to really enhance the look, right? Plus, and once you start coloring it up, it'll be pretty good. I'm not 100% sure what I want to do on these bases. I have an idea, but I want to at least get them coated in that brown, because I think what I want to do is build off of that and then put contrast gray over that, maybe thin down so it's not overbearing. And then I have a oil wash of kind of like a raw umber, I think, kind of like a yellowish tannish, and put that as a wash, oil wash over the base, and see what happens. But I don't really know. We'll see. That's kind of something you don't want to get too fully in depth in when you haven't even primed your models yet. So we have all 4 present and accounted for. This is definitely something that if you're doing this in a work area, I can feel the grit here. It's gonna get on things. You just want to clean it up carefully so you don't get grit into your paint. You gotta be careful. A clean workbench is an important thing to have, whether you're working in a booth, a bench, whatever it is. Clean is the name of the game. And here we are. So the Shadow Cat and the Elemental are already based. They've been based. It's been dry. I've cleaned it off. So I'll start with these guys for the purposes of what's the word? Putting the paint on the base to kind of lock it in. So once you let the glue fully dry, which might take a little bit longer because I put water with it in this case, but once it's fully dry, then we can blow it off, get it so it's as cleaned up as possible, and then we could do what I'm gonna do here on these guys, which is seal it. Now both of these miniatures are based or primer coated in Mr. Surfacer 1000, right? Highly recommend for primer coats for anything, no matter what type of paint you're using. But anyway, it I've noticed it doesn't. You can definitely cover flock and stuff with this, no problem. But I was either using a paintbrush or, in the case of the Elemental, an airbrush, and I wasn't really trying to get the Mr. Surfacer onto the flocking material because, um, it's I acrylics. I'm less concerned and I'll do it no problem. But this is a little bit. I mean, it's a lot in here. It's gonna go a long way, but it's not just for It's I find it to be more of a precious thing to use on particular things and not just put it on everything on the model. So the base, I got a little bit on there, but mostly avoided. Is all I'm trying to say there. So, um, I still gotta put the paint down. Is my point on the actual base. And I've been moving stuff around, so I gotta find this brown that I was using. Just try to keep it at least uniform. No, that's not brown. That's a metallic. Ah, here we are. It's a Citadel paint, Mornfang Brown. I find it's important to keep it. I was gonna say symmetrical, but keep it uniform, right? Now, it may not be important once I find that I basically completely kind of cover up this dark brown, but I'm gonna be painting up not in dark brown, so it'll be pretty obvious what's the base and what's not and everything else. So that's pretty cool. Alrighty. All right, let's yeah, it got warm in here. Not supposed to, but whatever. Let's get some paintbrush. Let's get a plate that doesn't have wet glue on it. If I have such a thing. Although I'm not really worried about thinning it to like do proper painting, so we can do it the taboo way um, of not thinning it down on a palette or anything, and just go right from the pot because we're dealing with a base. And one thing about this type of stuff is that, or painting up the sand and things of that nature, is it kind of can be a little bit absorbent of paint. So give it a decent shake. Still gonna wet our brush and thin a little bit in here because this stuff gets a little gloopy. And then touch it on there. And now we can get to work on just getting some brown down on the base here. I don't care if I get it on the sides because I will be cleaning that up later Once that'll be like one of the last steps. Honestly, will be cleaning up the ridge or the rim of the base for me. So I'm going to focus on the fire moth, which it's, well, in terms of a video coming on the channel eventually, I'll be focusing on the fire moth for actual painting purposes. This guy. That's why it's blue tack to a paint pot. It's an easy way to replicate what the Space Marine's on, which is a holder for your miniature, to make it a bit easier to work with. So I want to focus on the fire moth specifically because it's the lightest mech that I have. It's also pretty much the smallest mech because of that. So I figured I'd focus on that and doing like a painting video. Because if I could stay on camera, because if you can get the stuff looking good on your small mech, then the bigger ones, shouldn't be a problem at all. And considering the scheme I'm going for thus far is Alpha Galaxy, I'm gonna need to figure out those Jaguar spots and whatnot. So there's rosettes, if you will. So if I can figure it out on the fire moth, I can just take that and apply it to the bigger mechs, no problem, and have that uniformity. So one of the things about the modeling flock here and the PVA glue usage and putting paint down and getting it kind of saturated in paint, it's not going to necessarily pull up, but you might notice you're getting some, not pooling, but maybe a little bit of mounding going on with some of the sand a little bit. The goal is just to make sure that the green goes away. So we just put the brown over the green. When I see no more green, then I stop in that area and I move on until there's no more green on the base. Once I do that, then I call it a day and I let that dry. And this Shadowcat is primed in Mr. Surfacer, which isn't the color I'm going for, but just having, as you can see with the Fire Moth, the base in that brown and the model not bare plastic, it just feels so much more further along. And that's worth something in terms of like your mind, right? Like it's kind of like a psychological thing, psychological victory for yourself. So take it where you can get it. Keep yourself motivated. Now I may have to come back into this elemental and put some more stuff in on the base itself. You see, this elemental doesn't come with a base when you order it from Ironwind Metals. I don't know why. None of the Ironwind Metal, oh, I shouldn't say none. No, I guess I can say none. For the most part, none of them come with a base, including this 28mm pewter elemental. So I put it on a base, and I put it on one of my older pewter bases that Ironwind Metals also makes, but they also have plastic bases out there that are very similar. And it's not hollow, but it's not flush on the top like it is on these mechs that you've been seeing. Gotta shake this some more to get paint up in there to use. But as such, even though it does kind of sit on a little thing, there was gaps between how the elemental sits, or stands, I should say, on the little thing that it does stand on, and the actual base. So I tried to fill it in as best I can with glue and modeling sand, the flock, and some bits of cork even, because it's infantry size. It's 28mm infantry size stuff like a Space Marine. So I tried to treat its base like a Space Marine base concept. Not like a Space Marine literally, but like that scale of base. So I give it a bit more detail stuff going on there. And I'm just going to try and cover it all up. And then if it looks too unnaturally segmented from where its pewter is to the gap and everything else, I may go back in with glue and more basing material. So that's purely the nature of the base, though, and of the situation, because it's not like a little rim for itself. Like the feet are not just independent. There's like a piece of pewter, a pewter plate that the feet are a part of to give it a bit more rigidity and stability. If you get some of the paint on your model, don't worry about it. That's why I like doing this stage early. I'm going to be painting up the model some more, and I'm going to be painting up the base later. I've found, especially when I was doing 40K stuff, that if I did full squads and didn't touch the base at all, then I had to go back and fill in their bases and be careful and then do touch-up work on the squads. So I kind of learned to enjoy doing bases and get them going first and foremost to a certain stage at the very least. That way I can go back in and finish it up with relative ease without having to mess up the paint job much at all, or if at all. So with that said, we have ourselves a base for the elemental primed, more or less. Excuse me. I don't know what it is. Every time I turn on this dang camera, it starts feeling warmer in here than normal. My throat starts messing up for no reason. Particularly here, like if I'm doing a video game, it doesn't really do that anywhere near as much, if at all. But only here, doing some stuff, chilling, hanging out with myself, because nobody's here. But hey, it happens. Just Born Fame Brown, I'll keep it out because eventually these 4 mechs and the Space Marine will have to be done on that. I'm actually going to pretty much use the Space Marine as a guinea pig of sorts here to do the base and see how it looks that way, because I can make it work on the Space Marine, and if it's just not working for the purposes of what I want on this for Battletech stuff, I can then use that brown and then go up to Deserty and maybe do from Deserty I skip the gray, or from Deserty I go right to, or I do the, I don't know, I'll figure it out. In short, I have no idea, but just gonna let things fully dry some more. I don't want to start messing with those bases given the amount of glue I put on it. So we're in the waiting game now. It happens. I was gonna do this earlier, but I wanted to really rework on my setup here. So as you can tell, if you've seen any of the older C3 streams, you now have a better angle. Like you're more, I don't have to do any weird manipulation. Like I just, bow, you get to see it, no problem. I can also zoom in and out. I believe, I don't know if I can do it live, but I know I can do it. This I think would be really nice for some kind of unboxing, showcasing stuff as well. And hey, more power to it. I feel like I have more room a little bit. I don't feel as penned in. I still have to clean up things and move stuff around, but I feel like I have a bit more room for that. And then once I organize and neaten up, as it were, I can further refine and see. So that's pretty cool. It's the same camera. It's a webcam that I'm using. It works pretty well. It's the same one. It's just in a different position now because I can set it up that way. Same lights too. I will probably replace these lights just because they're kind of awkwardly in the way for stuff beyond the camera that way. And well, if I could have the lights up and out of the way some more, given my contraption setup that I have, it'll be better. And I can have even more working room and feel less like things in the way and whatever else. So, it's the little things, a little bit of progress. As far as paints go, it's a contemplation of gray is how I'm going to be doing, this 160 scale shadow cap piece. It's funny, I've been focusing on the 160 scale shadow cap for every C3 stream. This is the first one where I'm not, and it feels weird. It's not that I don't want to paint it up. I just wanted to get this basing going, and depending upon how that goes, I might fire up some of the orange recipe for this Space Marine to try and get the orange done, just for a change of color, really. Or focus on the 160th scale. But it's a matter of gray because I'm doing Alpha Galaxy. And I'm really feeling, I believe, Neutral Gray 1 from Gaia Notes, if it'll read. Um, it looks white and pale, which is a weird thing to say for a gray, but when you mix it up, it actually, you can see it here, it gets a bit grayer right here, and then that's going to be the rosette gray, I believe, as well. That's got to remember the colors, maybe do another test again to confirm, but that's what I'm feeling. So to do that, I got to mix this up. I'm not even going to really use thinner for it. I'm just going to mix it up with, I don't have the Blue Tamiya one, but I have this Badger Air Brush Company mixer that I'm going to use to mix up, and then I'm going to take a little bit of a brush right from the stalk here, dip it in, apply it, clean this off, clean it off first, do that, rinse and repeat more or less for some different grays to get a real kind of sense of like a palette swab or swab. What do they call those things? Color swatch? A palette swatch, more or less, a color swatch of different grays, making sure I know which one's which, maybe label it. That's what I'm going to do. To confirm, before really going all in, I'm putting the paint down with some thinner and whatever else. Plus, I still got a base or primer coat. I always say base, but primer coat really with surface coat, I suppose. These 4 light mechs to get them, to get everything on board. The reason I'm doing the Shadowcat is because the Shadowcat is the 1/60th scale that I'm working on. So I'm doing its associated mech in the standard Battletech scale as well, since they're going to be the same color scheme. It'd be kind of cool to see them side by side-ish, if you will. Kind of hard to do that when the armor is way bigger than the mech, but you get what I mean. It should be fun. In any case, there's that. These guys, I'm going to put the brown down first, then I'm going to base coat them. Even if I airbrush it and I get some on the brown, I'm not sure what I'm going to do for these light mechs, if I'm going to airbrush or not. The mech itself. Even if I get some of it on the flock after being brown, it's not a big deal, because I'm just going to be going over that again. So no harm, no foul there. My goal is not to have the base steel to show or really become a predominant feature. My goal ultimately for these mechs on their base is to have it kind of fade away. Not disappear, it can't, it's there. But as I was kind of alluding to earlier, when I see a model that's finished, including the base, I acknowledge that, even though I'm not consciously necessarily looking at their base, unless it's a big defining feature. Let's say it's got a big base, and you set it up to be a mini diorama of sorts, where like it's a camouflage scheme, so it looks like they're camoed to the base. That's cool. I take note of that. Or if something visually striking, maybe the base has a really bold color on it, or it's magma, or whatever the case is. There's reasons to pay attention to it, of course. But it's not that it's a negative that I'm not paying attention to it. It's more so that I acknowledge it's there. It's a desert base, or it's a jungle base, or whatever it is. I acknowledge it's there. I see that it's done and it's complete, and it just completes the look, but I'm focused on the mech. In a weird way, if it's just the black base and nothing's been done to it, or it's just been cleaned up and it's just a black base and that's it, it's distracting to me, because it's in my mind, I'm like, but it's not done yet, even though it's done, right? Everybody has their own taste. So let me be clear, if you don't want to do stuff on your base and you just want to have a clean black base when you're all said and done, you do you, because that's what you like. For me, when I look at bases, that's just how my mind processes it. That's why I do my bases how I do them. Or I should say, that's why I do my bases. I make it a point to do them. If I can find my colors. But yeah, so I'm thinking this is going to be the main neutral gray color. I just got to mix this up again. Neutral gray 1. Open her up. It's hard to tell. But yeah, there's that classic lacquer stink. So definitely wear a mask. Mix it up. Good and proper. Put it on a swatch. I think what I'll do, maybe I'll cut a piece of paper plate or get a cardboard piece. Something. Maybe I'll do that. I'll prime it in some surfacer so we have some common ground, like it would be on a model. And then from there, I'll do like a mix and a swatch of the neutral gray 1. And then I have neutral gray 2. And then I have I got a lot of the grays. I got warm light gray. So I wonder if it's neutral gray 2 and warm light gray. I don't know. That's why I have to do the swatch and make sure it's labeled. And I got much darker grays because I do need the outline. And I do have a black for that or a really, really super dark gray. So the thing is, I'm going to be doing this across all of the Battletech minis here. So Pewter Elementals getting the lacquer paints, the standard classic Battletech size stuff is getting the lacquer paints, and the 1/60th scale is getting the lacquer paints. Basically, I'm going to treat this to a degree like Gunpla. Nowhere near as intricate, honestly, but to a degree. And I'm going to do that for the rest of the Mega projects and the rest of the clan mechs as well. Just something different. I've painted so many things up in acrylic, and I've done it, if I could speak, in acrylic on the classic Timberwolf that I have in 1/60th scale. And it looks fine, but I know I can do. And I didn't do a crazy amount of shading and stuff there that I could have, but I'm really pleased with the result. So this, I'm gonna kick it up a notch. I'm gonna go Gunpla-esque as possible, and I figured that means delving into the paints themselves. 2. Maybe I'll pick up some Mr. Color. I don't have any Mr. Color. I just have Mr. Color, or Mr. Hobby, I guess you should say. I have Mr. Hobby, Mr. Surfacer, and I have Mr. Hobby, Mr. Color Thinner. So maybe I need some Mr. Hobby, Mr. Color paint. Maybe, I don't have any Gaia notes in green. Maybe I'll get some green from Mr. Color. I don't know. While I need green for doing medium laser emitters, I'm going to do the emitter colors. Or rather, I should say, I'm going to do the laser emitters and the colors they shoot out. So that should be fun. How is this glue looking? Let's mess with it a little bit. It's still soggy. I think they're basically done for the evening. We'll see. So yeah, it's crazy to just look at this 1/60th scale Shadowcat parts together based. Now, Mr. Surfacer is a good. I like this gray, but in comparison to how the actual paint, not Surfacer paint, but like these lacquer paints dry, it's night and day difference. Like they're more like a hardened shell. This is just a Surfacer kind of paint adhesion layer. Could the lacquer have went directly onto the 1/60th scale mechs or anything, or onto the plastic pieces? Yeah, they could, but you definitely benefit from a primer coat. This would be also referred to as a base coat. Like if you're doing this like a Space Marine, or you're doing like a knight or something, you your primer or your base would be black, and depending on the color you're going for, or a white or a gray or whatever else. So Mr. Surfacer is that primer surfacer coat, as it's known, I suppose. It doesn't fill in detail, but it does kind of help things feel just a bit more smoother. You could do some very fine sanding if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. I might do a little bit of panel line scraping, which will take some of the Mr. Surfacer off, but it'll make it smoother in the panel line areas, and then when I apply the lacquer paints, it'll cover no problem, and we'll be fine. But we'll see. That's That's just some food for thought. In fact, let me get the panel line tool that I have for scraping, which is this guy. And let's see. Let's see how it messes things up. I can always come back in with more paint. And if I scrape it down, it's definitely taking the paint off and revealing some of the mud underneath, but it's smoothing it out, or making it a defined line. And it's important to have a defined line when you're doing stuff like this, so I'm okay with that. All that means is I know that I'll basically have to let the actual lacquer color kind of fill it in, maybe still scrape it out. And then when I do my panel line color, which is going to be black there, it should be fine. But these are the things you kind of learn as you go. It's important that you take the time to learn from not so much mistakes, but experiences. I've made mistakes on the Shadow Cat here, this big one. You're going to. On most models you do make some mistakes. Nobody's perfect. The important part is to learn, adapt, and overcome, and make even better looking stuff. So that's the goal. That's a nice line. Things are looking pretty good here. And it feels pretty smooth. Any paint can gunk up detail if you're not careful. I have a little bit of that going on in certain places, but it's not enough to be a real cause for concern. Just going to clean up some stuff here and there. I don't need to do anything inside this hole because that's what's going to sit on the legs, so you're never going to see that. It's important to know what you really are never going to see, so you don't waste too much time and paint in those areas. Just want to be a little careful in certain spots because I know that what I had to do for fill-in, so I don't want to get too greedy here. So I'll leave it alone. But here is more scraping. Honestly, I probably didn't do enough scraping prior to the priming, which is why it's like this. That's okay. It'll get cleaned up and end up looking good. So just more fiddliness. I feel like every model you work on of a certain type is going to have a certain total amount of fiddliness, and it's that you are going to do to the model or want to do to the model or end up doing to the model to get a certain look. And it's just at what point do you acknowledge the fiddliness you need to do and do it, right? So, there's that. Now, when I do prime up with Surfacer these light mechs, I'll probably also just touch up some spots on the big guy. You're always going to do some touch up that way. It's important to note when to kind of stop, as it were, but you're still going to have the need to do some touch up here and there, so don't be afraid of that. This isn't a case of, being done once you put a certain coat down. It's not like, okay, on to the next, I can no longer rework on stuff. You definitely can and probably should if you're going for a certain finish and look and desire. Like I'm going back into this panel line here, re-scraping it. And there's another case where I know I probably got to leave it alone, do my paint job, and then re-scrape it, and then do the panel lining effect. And it should be okay from there. But I know for other details like this in the future, on the other Mega Project pieces, to maybe devote a little bit of extra scraping before putting the primer down on stuff like this. Because what I thought would be sufficient just needs a little bit of help. That's okay. it doesn't ruin anything to do this and then go back in with paint again and rinse and repeat. So do with that info what you will for the project in question you're working on. Just don't be afraid to make extra work for yourself in the name of making it look even better and learning. Always make sure you're learning in this hobby so you can not make as many learning mistakes or whatever, or do as many redos and touch-ups in future projects. You constantly learn, constantly improve. Oops, that's good. I got glue on my finger. I was like, what is that? That's glue coming off. No biggie. And then kind of redefine some of these lines. And you're golden. Ain't no thing but a chicken wing. I do like wings. One thing I'm going to try to keep to a minimum on all my Battletech stuff for Alpha Galaxy at the very least, and probably Star League for any Sphere stuff, is I'm going to try and keep metallics to a minimum on these mechs. I think they work pretty well on like missile bay areas, perhaps. As like the backdrop for like the missile heads or whatever, or where the holes for the missiles would, are to kind of signify its missiles. I think those tend to work out pretty well for metallics. But even if I can, I'm going to try to avoid it there too. Just going to see what I can do. The only reason I want to avoid metallics is typically I go for metallics and I enjoy doing them, and I do. It's not like I don't. But I just feel like for Battletech, so many things have a coating or are painted, and I want to represent that. I feel like if you have raw metal in certain cases outside of the missile pod areas, the missile racks, I feel like unless it's part of the scheme, that's almost like indicative of being run down a little bit or damaged on these mechs. Because there are certain faction schemes, and Smoke Jaguar has one of them for one of their galaxies, where you have like a silver or even like some type of metallic, not just silver, but some type of metallic as part of your scheme, as a main part of your scheme. But Alpha Galaxy is not that. So I want to really try to keep it to the absolute minimum, which is not something I normally do. Normally I embrace the metallic, so it just feels right to try and keep it to a minimum this time. Especially because like this isn't gonna be ornate with gold or bronze or anything like that. It would be an iron or like a steel type of color, silver basically. And this is already going to be a predominant, well, not predominantly, a really heavily gray color scheme. So I don't need any more of that type of cold, cool color going on in other ways. The mech's already going to have that by virtue of being Alpha Galaxy color scheme. So I don't need competition in that department. So yeah, just some food for thought. Now I do have the panel line paint, like the Tamiya panel liners, and they do work really nice, especially when you have a nice groove and channel that you scraped and made sure is prominent and not filled in. And I will use it here and there, but on this, I'm probably really going to make use of an oil wash for things, which definitely gets into the recesses, and it's going to be a black oil wash, so it should be able to cover things even if it ends up being raw mud, as it were, on that I put on this mech to smooth it out. So that is more or less why I'm not super concerned, because I feel like it's going to look fine once I'm done anyway. But in either case, especially for the Tamiya panel liner, wherever you would use it, you want to make sure you have very clearly defined panel lines, more or less. So scraping it makes it nice and sharp, which makes it take that panel lining real nice. So, just food for thought. Obviously, the more defined it is before painting and the less you do a big buildup, the better it'll be for yourself. Whatever this is, I'm going to rip it off and then just recover it up because it looks to be kind of globule. Yeah, it was a mud globule I didn't catch before painting. Even if I don't touch up that spot when I put the lacquer paint on it, it's gonna cover it because it's smooth now. But like, lacquers have really good coverage. The surfacer is there and it's nice to be there, but it's hardly really gonna be like, if I don't have it, I can't do the look type of deal. Not at all. All right, let's get a feel on this some more. All right, what I'm gonna do is take this plate here and use it. So I'm gonna mute this because it's gonna be really loud. No, I guess I didn't mute it. Psych! I didn't mute it at all because the button didn't work. Now I tested and it does work, but you heard all that. So take that. But I'm gonna put some brown on this thing, on the Space Marine one. I'm kind of slowly work my way through the rest of it. So I'm gonna be careful. I'm not gonna really like brush stroke it on. I'm gonna kind of dab the brown on there, and the dabbing will help me from kind of lifting off any of the paint that might, or paint, any of the glue that's not fully, and the sand that's not fully finished. Thin this paint just a little bit more in the pot. Again, I'm not worried about using a palette because we're not here except for anything other than sealing in all this sand. I'm just kind of dab it on like that. Now I want to coat everything, even the cork, because the cork, the sand, all of it kind of soaks up paint a decent amount. So this will not only make it a color more in line with where I'm wanting it, because I don't want it to be green, it also kind of helps seal it to the base. Like the glue is going to connect it to the base, the paint's going to help seal it to the base as well. So that's always fun and necessary. But we want to be careful. Like I'm not brushing. I'm kind of just almost like stippling. I'm just pressing onto the base because the glue isn't like perfectly cured, but it's close enough. And I'm going to be a little bit more careful getting close to the orange on this guy because that's where I want it to be, and I don't want to make it dirty necessarily. So I'm going to work carefully around the boots. And this is where you might want to start this way and gently make your outline around it as like a border. That way you can be a little bit more carefree once you get away from it and not have to worry. So that's kind of the intent. I do wish these paint pots were eyedroppers. I mean, I would have to use it on a palette at that point, but it would just be easier. But they're not. In any case, let's carefully get the brown onto the cork around the foot here. A little bit's not the end of the world. I'm just not looking to make it super gunked up or whatever else. And also vice versa, when I do eventually work on this model some more and paint the orange some more, I get on the base, not the end of the world either. This isn't going to be the final form of the base. It's just kind of like a locking in type of deal. And it's taking a lot of paint in comparison to, let's say, painting up a model, because I'm just kind of dabbing it on there. I'm letting the sand and the cork soak up that paint and kind of help lock in that sand, which is modeling flock. Now it is already green, so it is kind of colorized sand, so it's not going to suck it up quite as much as standard model sand, but it's still going to help seal it, because now you have a layer of paint over the individual block granules, if you will. So now it's kind of like a sealant on top of the flock, on top of the sand. That's why I like doing it. It kind of really helps things out. This is older Mournfang brown. So the paint pot is being a little difficult. That happens with acrylics if you have an older thing that's separated a bit and has had a lot of its water dry out. And I've kind of hydrated it, and it's working well enough. But if you were going to use this as a primary color for, let's say, a force or something a bit more intricate, you might be better suited to like a fresher pot. But for this, more than sufficient. That's how sufficient it is. It's more than being sufficient. And work our way up carefully to that boot. And work our way around, sealing in that look on the base. The longer you give the glue to fully cure, the better, and the more abrasive you can be in your application of said paint. But you know, it's not going to ultimately hurt it. Put it to you that way. To do it a little bit sooner, you just got to be careful you don't lift a lot of that sand and stuff off, right? So you want to make sure the glue is pretty well and truly dry on there, because this is water based and it's PVA glue, so you can start moving things around and lifting things off the base if you're not careful. Now, to be fair and kind of talk about this on like a super high brain level and pretend that's the idea, in moving it around like this when it's a little soggy still, not the paint, not the glue, but when the paint kind of making it into a little bit of a soggy fest, you do get a little bit extra kind of effect going on. You get to kind of bunch up the sand in ways that you wouldn't just by having the glue down there. So if you don't mind being extra tedious with it, you can kind of lock in a pretty cool look that you didn't have starting off because you moved some stuff around. But just like that, this guy is now got his base all wet, and if we look at it, just this guy, you can see it's looking pretty cool now. It really helps the effect overall, right? Obviously it doesn't look done, but it looks much further on just by putting that base in a in a similar color to itself, like fully uniform color. All right, let's get this Mistlinks going. Because we haven't done any painting of these light mechs, we can be a bit more aggressive with the application. We don't want to gunk up detail, but we don't have to worry about being super clean around them. The cleaner the better, always, in my opinion. But we can go a little crazy with it if we want. No, I say crazy, but we can go a little bit more hard on it. Still don't want to brush stroke it because we don't want to move the flock too much in this case. You just want to get it on. Now, if you have a particularly opaque ink that you like, you can use that in place of paint at this stage just to kind of lock it in. It will definitely sagify it up some more. But if you can kind of get it where it disperses more easily across the base for you, then all the better, for sure. But this will work just fine. I didn't choose this for any particular reason. I just chose it because it was the nearest brown that I had, right? And I figure whatever I end up doing as the basing concept is not going to be urban, so I don't have to worry about being a dark gray base to start off with. I like urban a lot, but I figure I want this thing to stand out, the mechs to stand out, and Alpha Galaxy is already, you know, several different grays, so a gray base wouldn't be the best option. That being said, I'm gonna go for more of like a urban-ish, center-ish thing, particularly on the bigger guys, the 160 scale stuff, because I think I'm gonna give them custom bases, or I say custom. I gotta make the bases up for that size, and it's still gonna be in a similar base to these small guys. But if you've read BattleTech lore or played any of the games, whatever, you know that BattleTech will have cities or urbanized areas right alongside wilderness or like desert plains or whatever else. So you have, and it's not like it's unique in doing this. You have this in all settings, really, but you have pretty good visuals of it, where you will have the city right by, like, desert plains or badlands or whatever. So instead of it just being a typical gray urban jungle, it's literally like the streets, and then right around it is more of a tan color and whatnot. It looks pretty cool. That's kind of what I think I'll be going for here. I don't know. I just don't want to be your typical jungle, nor do I want to be your typical desert or typical urban. Maybe some hybridization of stuff for the fun of it. In any case, this is still rather wet, I can tell, because I'm moving the individual pieces of the flock around a bit much. So I'm going to not get too aggressive in applying this paint. I'm going to call it here on the mist links because it's basically coated anyway. And I'm going to give more time to the rest because it's still moving stuff around. So when it gets wet. So that's important. You got to know when to fold them, more or less, right? You know when to hold them. But, and looking at stuff, I feel like I'm going to need to put more flock or something on this elemental. It's just not where I want it. You can see, I don't know. Actually, it doesn't look too bad now that I hold it up to the light. Maybe down in here a little bit. Could use some extra detail. It just feels too sunken in, too much like I'm trying to fill in a base and not a lot of, hey, that looks pretty cool, like it's a thing. If that makes any sense. So let's try something. And by try something, I do mean try something. I'm going to take some flock out of here carefully. I'm going to mix it into this watered down paint. And make like a glue, I guess. I don't know. I might add a bit more glue. I might add a bit more flock. But I want to make more like a sand paste. Out of this modeling flock and this glue. I want it to be pasty. I don't want it to be super liquidy. Which is definitely going to take time to dry, right? But the reason for that is I want to apply it in a very particular way on this elemental here. Oh, that would be bad. Let's not knock the flock everywhere. Crazy kooky concept, but I'm going for it to not knock the flock everywhere. So if I put this goop down, because what I did before is I just filled this in with glue and I put flock down on top of it. And while that kind of sort of worked in a good amount of places, I feel like the big problem is the glue is gonna kind of shrink when it dries up and take the flock with it. So instead, if I make this goopy mixture, this goopy mess, and I put it down here, try to fill in certain sections, it'll do better, hopefully, at retaining its overall dimension. And then I can just come back in with brown again and blend it in when it's fully dry. So that's the idea. We'll see how the execution actually goes. But hey, you gotta just try things out, right? Experiment. It's just a base after all. It's not the end of the world. So, but this looks a little weird. It looks a little weird on the base, right? The model's a focal point after all. The bases still tell a story, so can't be all that bad. So let that fully dry, and then we'll come back and paint it on that guy. The Shadow Cat looks fine, so that's good. And the Fire Moth is fine. And the Space Marine's fine, but it's not dry yet. When you goop it on and you water down the paint a bit and you really just kind of like dab it on kind of thick, you're not really gunking up detail because the sand, the flock kind of absorbs some of it and it kind of moves stuff around, but it takes a while to dry. And just seeing how the Mislink's base was kind of playing and interacting there, if you can kind of see it, I feel better in letting the rest of the light mix stuff dry a bit. Rather than risk calamity, as they say. And by they, I mean me, and say it right now, and that's probably about it. So calamity it is. In any case, if you didn't want to use that acrylic, you could use Tamiya acrylic. This is metallic brown, so it wouldn't work out too well on that one. The problem, no, it's not really a problem. Let me see this one that I used to have. I used to use this as another palette thing. This is bronze, so that doesn't help either. The thing about acrylics from Tamiya is that they're not water-based. See if I can get one that's a little bit easier to see. This is UN gray, which, by the way, not a bad looking gray at all. Can I even open? Oh, I can open this. Probably because I never used it. If you were to smell this, which you don't go sniffing paints, but when you're using paints, you're gonna get a waft of their odor. This almost smells like a cough syrup in a way. It's what reminds me of. But you'll notice here, you get it to focus with the light glare. Maybe you won't notice it. Let's try this real quick just to help, if it does help. There we go. It's a flammable warning. The Tamiya acrylics are flammable, and they smell not like water-based. So, let me play with the light brightness now. All right. So, what that means is you don't need, but it's highly advised to have some acrylic thinner from Tamiya. You can probably get other thinners that would work, but I just feel Tamiya made their paints this way. They formulated their paints. That's the thinner for their formulated paints. Might as well use that. It's why I have Mr. Hobby's Mr. Color Thinner, as well as Gaia Notes T07 Thinner. Yes, the T07 actually is really good thinner and can be used for any lacquer paints, but might as well if it doesn't hurt. In fact, you can find, I found this in a Hobby Town. So, Hobby Town, USA. So, it was not always stocked there, but it happened to have it. I guess they stock certain things at certain times. So why not? Um, Not that hard to get. Amazon's gonna be a good place to get things too. So to kind of give you a bit of a closer look at what we did there, you can see once that is dry, that should kind of help stay without looking sunken in, and then I can just paint it up. And it'll be less like I put a model on a base that has an inset and more like it's walking on terrain, which is the goal. The goal of basing is to have it tell a bit of a story for you. Even though if that story is fairly subtle and you don't really pay too close attention to the base, you just notice it's on a desert base, let's say, and in your mind, you see this thing and now you have this image of it being out there in the field somewhere, not just a model on a black piece of plastic or whatever. So I actually really like bases in a way that like mini diorama, mini terrain pieces, especially if you have more room to work with. One of the things I like about Space Marines now being on this size of base is that there's a lot more room to work and do stuff with, and surprisingly, it still has not dried. Um, but yeah, I like being able to work with more of a base. Now this big guy, this 160 scale Shadow Cat, I think I saw online I can get a hex piece of wood. It's like a wooden frame canvas thing, but it's wood. It's not actually canvas. It's all wood. I can get like like basically enough to have an extra piece, but it would be standing kind of that tall. If you can see my hand, like a little thick, but it's not hollow. It's inset. So I could either have them stand in the inset, but I don't want to do that, or I could use one and fill it up with a bunch of like spackle paste and whatever else to kind of make an undulating surface is an idea, or I can use the flat side, whatever. But I want to put the 160 scale, the Mega Project stuff, of which the Shadowcat is the first. Shout out to the two people, one on a short, one on a video, that actually guessed correctly. That's why I have no problem saying it. Obviously, you can tell pretty. But I've been working with it, so it's pretty obvious to tell now. But guessed still before that, which is pretty cool. But I want to put them on a base, and I want to kind of. It's going to be a star, and I want them orchestrated in a way that that base will sit flush into like a diorama thing. So I got to factor in how I want to consider that. I also got to factor in how do I want these things to be attached to the base. Originally, I was thinking magnets, but being 3D printed in the way 3D printed, it's not a thick infill. So if I drilled into the feet, I don't know how well it would hold a magnet. For the purposes of constantly, I don't know how strong or how many magnets I would need to have it be secured to the base, um, or whatever else. And if I even would want to do that to the base, because I have no real reason to take them off the base. The only thing I was thinking is that I could you can get iron powder, um, and you can mix that into modeling sand and everything else, and at a high concentration, and basically kind of use it like flock. And when you lay it down across something and you paint it up, it's now magnetic, and this could stick to that. So you could have endless posing on the base, which is an interesting idea. The problem is strength. I really don't know how strong it's going to be on that base to hold the model in place. These things aren't that heavy, but they're a little cumbersome, right? So I don't want it potentially just falling over, even though there's magnets on the feet. And then I got to carefully hold the base and the model to move it around. My other thought was some pegs into the feet, at least one on each foot, maybe two. It depends on the foot and how it's orchestrated. Uh, and I was just going to use two-part epoxy to kind of really lock it in onto the base. Just put it so you won't be able to see the epoxy. Just have it so it's kind of epoxied into the base where the feet actually stand on the base, whatever might be there, and the pegs. If I was going to do that though, how do I do the base? Do I do the base up first? Maybe. Food for thought. So I overthink bases. I overthink everything. Welcome to Mechanical Mayhem. Uh, so uh, yeah, glad to have you here. Um, so the Shadow Cat is actually dry, looking pretty good. Will look even better once I determine exactly which gray is meant to be on it for the main armor color. I was hoping to do that today, but in resetting up my setup here and dealing with stuff, adulting and taking care of my lawn and the house. My lawn's a disaster. Don't ask me about it. Um, really upset about it because it was looking so good, but it's a complete disaster now. So doing all the adult stuff they have to do, with responsibilities and such. Can't just hang out in BattleTech land. But oh hey, the Mistlinks is also getting there. Look at the difference, by the way, not just in the base, but in the overall, I think, feel you get from these two mechs. If I could get them, like, yeah, size, but like they both have their base done, but the Shadowcat's primed. It just looks so much more like a mech, like I'm getting there, than just having that bare plastic. It's crazy what one little coat of paint can do. Um, at least I think so, but I'm easily impressed, I suppose. Who knows? So, yeah. Where is it? Speaking of bases and scale and whatnot, careful. Here we go. Here is a classic Battlemaster. I really love this model. Um, Glad to have it. I like the way the Battlemaster currently looks, but it's just such a. I really like the classic look. I'm pretty pleased with the cockpit. I think I could do better, but I'm pleased with how it is. This is basically Star League slash Aerodani Light Horse colors. Um, but the base in question is pretty simple, but it gets the point across. And also, um, I'm gonna try to do something similar, but not exactly the same. I have some vegetation, quote unquote vegetation. It's not real, obviously, on there. But being on a mech, it looks like a pretty big bush. Now, if you put that on the Space Marine, it's gonna be a small bush. It all depends on perspective here. So we do have to be careful, whatever we put on our base for BattleTech, that the overall effect doesn't seem weird for what it is. I have another example of that here with the Mad Dog. Now this is a classic Mad Dog. It's old. The base isn't done well at all, but it's got a little bit of like overgrown like wild grass and then dirt. But this is paying up as Alpha Galaxy, and I'm gonna do a much better job this time. I'm pleased with this. I did this over a decade ago. Um, while I've been a fan of BattleTech and these mechs and everything and Clansmo Jaguar since a kid, this was originally paying up in a really, you know, without even a primer coat, just testers, um, camouflage, green and black, just smeared all around it. Then I cleaned that off and I did this uh, much later. It's over a decade old, this paint job though, and I'm pleased enough with it. You can see the spots, the rosettes. They're there. They're not fully outlined because they're not on an actual Jaguar, but the gray's too dark for where I want to be nowadays, and there's not enough rosettes. So that's what I'm going to rectify with these newer models. Let's see here. Hmm. All right. I think I'm going to put some brown on this Kit Fox's base. Because why not? Now we can make this kind of thin for paint because it's just meant to be soaked up by the basing material. And kind of seal the deal, as it were. And we're going to be painting some type of terrain feature over it, or basing coloration scheme over it. So as long as it's no longer green, that's all we're really looking for. I do try to be careful around the feet, because I do want to be able to clean off the flock once everything's fully dry. Like in the morning, I'll just try to clean off the mechs in the base. You can get it on camera there. Otherwise, like here, I would definitely want to clean off that foot, so I don't want to get too much paint on it at all on that foot, because it'll make it hard to clean the flock off. Just as an FYI, in case you are curious, should you stumble across this. If you have stumbled across this after the fact, you're watching it, after the live stream is over, and you made it this far, hit that subscribe button. What are you doing? It's free. It's easy. Clearly, something is compelling and interesting. And share your thoughts. So, there you go. That's my spiel for you there. All right. I do plan to also discuss, like I'm here on the live stream, I'm doing some Space Marine painting, right? The base there and whatnot. I do plan to also do some more stuff beyond Battletech. Because I like Battletech a lot. It's my favorite setting. If I can get this back on camera. But there are things that I also really enjoy, I wouldn't mind discussing. And maybe I also want to kind of take things from Battletech and go beyond Battletech and how that could be in real life. So keep an eye out for stuff like that. Should be fun. And look at that, Kit Fox is done. Which means we're on to the Cougar. So let's carefully get some paint going on the Cougar's base. The less cleanup, the better, in my opinion. So that's why I'm not looking to get too much. I don't want to gunk up any detail. Not that I will, but I'm not looking to try and have to clean up or paint over. Not that Mr. Surfacer will have a problem. It definitely won't. But the goal isn't to have too many layers of paint, as it were. How about that? If you wanted to go really old school, you could just do some brown on the model, or on the base, I should say, and leave some of that green flock exposed as if it were grass. That would be some really kind of old school looking stuff, but we're not going to do that. We're going to be a bit more advanced than that and give everything a proper coating. And if we were to use grass, I have clumps of things inside of grass that we could use, but I'm not really looking to do that. At least not yet. Obviously, once I get a better sense of what's going on these bases, I'll consider it. Now what's neat is I could still go back in here and let's say make one of these into a road on the base, right? I could just put extra stuff down on the base and then paint up certain things into a really dark gray, like a blacktop or whatever, or do anything. I could do this very path-like. So the brown isn't something you're committed to sticking with at all. You can definitely mix things up or mess things up, but luckily it's a model. Worst case scenario, we make a mess in a stripping bath of isopropyl alcohol and drop the whole thing, base and all, in there, and make a bit of a mess, but get the model cleaned up and redo things again. Not a big deal. But we're good here. We haven't messed anything up. And the cougar, mostly off screen because I wasn't paying attention. I got in the zone there. My bad. Is based, or at least has its base based. Does it make any sense? Not what the kids mean when they say base, I don't think, but it's what we mean. So here we are. The adder is left, and then of course the elemental once that goop dries, which is going to take some time for sure. Gotta be careful here on the adder again. Need to clean up the feet once everything's fully dry. I'm just looking to get it sealed on top, so when I do aggressively clean off the mech's parts, I don't have the base falling apart on me. And you could use once everything is dry and you're looking to kind of get stuff to come off, you can just use like a Q-tip or a dry paintbrush, right? You're just kind of trying to be like an archaeologist or a paleontologist, depending upon which one you like more, and gently brush off the sand from your finding. I think it's more associated with paleontologists with their fossils, although archaeologists do dig, and they would definitely, carefully, meticulously clean off a finding, I'm sure. But it's more of a paleontologist thing. And no, they're not the same. They're definitely not the same. The amount of people that confuse paleontology and archaeology, I don't know if I should be surprised or not by that, but it is surprising to me. And again, I majored in archaeology before doing what I do now. So maybe that's because I'm in the know more because of that. But still, archaeology has nothing to do with dinosaurs and everything to do with people. So bear that in mind in case you're wondering. Paleontology isn't necessarily, I think, you don't have to just do dinosaurs there, I'm sure. But you get what I'm saying. The point simply is they're not the same thing, archaeology and paleontology. Even though they might practice similar concepts. All right. Look at that. And just like that, those mechs feel so much more further along, even though we haven't actually touched the mech, right? All I did was the actual base. I didn't even touch the mech yet, and we have it already feeling like decent progress is made. At least that's how my mind works. Clean off this brush a little bit because we kind of were going crazy with it on the brown, but that's okay. If you're not satisfied with the cleanliness of your brush after you do everything, don't freak out. If the water just isn't cutting it, just use some isopropyl alcohol. I have 99%. It's technical grade, I guess, isopropyl alcohol for like printing. You can get it off of Amazon. But you can just use rubbing alcohol at that point. That's like 70% or like 80% or whatever. You just want something that's going to basically strip the paint off of the bristles without damaging the ferrule too much. And isopropyl alcohol is really good for that. So I'm just gonna take a look-see, feel. This is actually coming along faster than I thought to kind of solidify. We'll give it a few more minutes of time. Why do I've been doing that a lot in talking. I leave out parts of a sentence. I don't know why. Um, maybe the brain's doing too many brain-eating things at the same time. But yeah, really looking forward to making that color swatch to get a real feel. I'm going to label them. So this is neutral gray, so I'll just do NG1, NG2. This is 2. NG4. I don't have 3. Then I'll be like warm light gray. I'll do WLG or whatever I need to do to kind of help that out. And then after that, you know, put the little smear of paint down, let it fully dry and cure, and get a sense of exactly what gray is going to be great for your base color. Because Alpha Galaxy, it's all gray to start off with. Mech 5 Clans, I have a video. I recorded the audio. I gotta splice things together for it about doing a far too deep of a dive analysis on Alpha Galaxy scheme. But so that's in the works slowly. But basically, it's gray with more gray, and then some super dark gray akin to black, if not black itself, for the outlines. So I want to make sure I get the right gray. I want it to be brighter or lighter gray than this Mad Dog here, right? So yeah, we gotta work on that, and then from there it'll be trying to replicate the rosettes, and I'm starting with the Fire Moth being the main focal point. This guy, but just look at that surface area. I mean, it's gonna be kind of difficult. I'm doing the top half only in the rosettes, but I gotta find a rosette size that isn't too small and also not too big. Erring more on the side of big, as Jaguar rosettes in real life are a bit larger than the leopard counterparts, for example. So I gotta do that in the top half, and then I gotta do that to all these other smaller mechs, and the Shadow Cat, and the big Shadow Cat, and eventually this Elemental. It's gonna be mental. And I have 4 more 160 scale mechs to work on, but Shadow Cat first. Once the Shadow Cat's good to go, in terms of its paint scheme being pretty much done, then I'll carefully set it somewhere, work on the base, while also printing the next mech in question. So that'll be fun. I just gotta figure out how to do the base. Yeah, so something this big as this 160th scale, or 28 millimeter if you want to say that, because that's the same thing roughly. Shadowcat, when I get the base, however I want to do it, it could be beneficial given the size to kind of outline and draw on the base as kind of a bare bones setup to get a certain idea of what's going on. Funnily enough, which is kind of crazy. So, you know, that's food for thought that I never thought I would do. Trying to think. I think of all the mechs on this table, the Cougar is the newest one of the bunch. So that's kind of funny in terms of like timeline when they came out. Yeah, kind of nuts. So the Space Marine is finally getting closer to being dry for its base, and it's looking pretty good. But I eventually work on this some more. I think I'm going to do the orange to get the orange done so I can get the eye lenses on the helmet done. And then I can attach the backpack to this. And then this guy could actually, and then finish the base. And this guy can come off of this because I don't need him on this to do his arms. That's really all that's left is the arms. I'll bring up the backpack real quick. This was the test I did for the scheme, and it is orange despite the fact that it's hard to tell on camera, but I am really pleased with the effect and how it looks and everything. So, it's a DIY. As much as I'm a fan of the Dark Angels and 40K, Post Heresy, and everything else, and other loyalists, I always like the idea of making up my own force. And orange is my favorite color, and it's been really hard. I'm really picky when it comes to getting orange. And I think I'm getting orange how I want it, so I'm pretty pleased with that. Not that I'm gonna make an army and play with it. I'm just gonna make this Marine, maybe some others over time slowly. And that's about it. I got a lot of 40K stuff I gotta unload, to be honest with you. Anyways, that's some random factoid for you. So the reason why I decided to purposely take out all the light mechs that I have is because I want to get them done, and I want to paint up all of my clan mechs, but I feel like there's a dire wolf in one of them, right? Obviously that's super cool, and I'm gonna want to work on that. The Warhawk is one of my favorite assault mechs. You know, these type of mechs are eye catching. They're cool. They're the ones you probably want to go to and paint. And it's not that I'm trying to make myself do them last, but you owe it to yourself to get even your lightest mechs painted up. Even if you don't plan to use, like, I don't know if I plan to really ever truly get heavily involved in the gaming aspect of things for Battletech. It's been so long since I last played Battletech that I basically need to start fresh. But I've never done Alpha Strike or whatever, so am I gonna really use the Fire Moth? Well, the answer is yes. It's a Fire Moth. Why not? But anyways, uh, even if I don't plan to have a Mistlinks in the formation, I might as well have him painted up. It deserves it, right? So that's my point there. Um, so that's the Mornfang Brown, more or less done. I just got this elemental to do, so I didn't want to leave the paintbrush, uh, chock full of paint and getting all gunky. That's why I cleaned it. You should definitely clean mid painting and everything else. You shouldn't just let things get gunked up, especially on the airbrush side. But I think I can dab on some brown to that and have it look a lot better. So let's make a mistake and do that. Because clearly I'm going to try and do this and it's going to mess something up because it's not ready. But it's ready because I say it's ready, right? That's how this works? The answer is no. That's not how painting works, but we're going to pretend. That's for sure. So we just kind of dab it on here. And see what happens. See how much lifts up, if any. I don't need it to be perfectly flat, and that's another thing, especially on bases that have kind of a divot to them like this. You don't necessarily need to make your goal to have the base be perfectly smooth flat, unless you're trying to do a roadway or a runway or something. Then yeah, I get it. But if you're not, having it have some undulation, right, some variance in its topography, if you will, just lends itself to the effect typically. So I put some cork in a couple of places to help with that as well. And then putting this extra stuff on there, this second layer of flocking material mixed with glue, should also help a decent margin as well in terms of hiding the fact that the base had a hollow center more or less, and that the model was standing on a little piece of pewter plate to help it be sturdier, right? So here we go. Now it is rather weird, in my opinion, that bases aren't included in these Ironwind Metal products. Um, that I don't get. Now, granted, you can get bases either from Ironwind Metals, that'll be pewter bases. I think they also have plastic bases, I'm not sure. But I have some more pewter ones, and I have a bunch of plastic that you can get off of Amazon. So, um, you know, it's not like they're exactly hard to get or not are super difficult. I just don't know why they don't include them in the model. But they don't, which is rather annoying. But also, I don't think many people, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon your point of view, I don't think many people are actually going to their website to try and pick up a particular mech, maybe in passing, maybe see some in the store, or you decide, yes, they have a mech that just isn't made in a force pack, and I'm gonna get it because the price point is about half the price of a whole force pack just to get one pewter model, and they tend to be in the older kind of classic looks for the ones that you know can still be done that way. And they do a Timberwolf, but it's like I'd rather just have the plastic force pack Timberwolf. I have an older Timberwolf, so I do have one, but I'd rather just have the more modern design than the classic Timberwolf because I think it's done better on the plastic. It's got better detail. If it was a classic design, I'd still want the plastic one too because I just think they'd do a better job with it. But because the scale's a bit bigger, the stuff is a little bit bigger than, at least it feels a little bit bigger than their pewter counterparts. So with that, let's rinse out this paintbrush some more. And see how she do. Probably gonna have to use isopropyl alcohol on this thing, just because I'm not liking how clean it's getting. That's okay. It's clean enough so that it's not mess with anymore, and then I can clean it even better later. But here is the elemental now with that second layer complete, and it's looking a lot better in my opinion. Really, really cool. So, like that. And that's all the Battletech stuff based that I'm currently working on. I could bust out heavier mechs, but I'd have to put the glue down and do all that basing again. And I'm not ready to work on them yet. I gotta pace myself. I don't want to make too much of a backlog because then you get kind of that feeling of, oh boy, that's so much to do, especially with a tedious paint scheme like Alpha Galaxy. What I can say, even though I haven't done as many uh, rosettes on the mech that I have done, is that you definitely need to trust the process on this scheme. That's for sure. Um, yeah, looking pretty good. How is this thing coming? Surprising was still wet, but I did lay it on kind of thick, literally. So, but the base is looking good. I think it'll be pretty striking once this model's done. So, this orange, in case you're curious, as a random palette cleanser from all the gray talk, this orange is something that I've been working on for a while in terms of trying to figure out. I have a lot of orange paint in this attempt, including, even though I haven't tested them out yet, I do have a, as I'm talking directly into the mic, whoops, I do have this Mandarin Orange Nazca paint. It's alongside the rest of my Guy Notes paints, and I have good hopes for this because lacquers coat extremely well. But in any case, what I end up using is, if I can clean this up, contrast Magma Droth Flame, which is one of their newer contrasts, relatively speaking, from Citadel color. And I thinned it 1 part Magma Droth Flame to 3 parts contrast medium. So I turned it from a contrast paint more into like a stain or a glaze, where it doesn't try to seek out its self shading because I thinned it down 3 parts medium to 1 part of the contrast paint. It's an effect I saw done for Imperial Fist's yellow with the yellow contrast paint, and I just applied it to this orange one. Now I have the other orange contrast paint, and that orange was too deep, too brownish deep, if that makes any sense. So Magma Droth Flame looks rather reddish on camera, and depending upon how you look at it, but the result when you thin it down 3-to-1 is very orange, and I like it because it's meant to be an orange. So finally settled on that, and I'm doing it over a base of like a a beige or a bone color that I am shading and highlighting. Um, but what I'm doing a little bit different for my shading is instead of using like a darker brown, I'm using purple for the shade. I did it on that backpack, which was complete, and that's because purple is a natural shade to orange, right? Like if you're looking to paint up orange normally, you could actually thin down purple pretty well and kind of use it as in like the darker recesses as opposed to a dark brown or anything like that. Uh, in terms of color theory, color wheel stuff. So I use purple as the shade. I'm also going to be using purple as the helmet lenses as a random FYI, but it's working pretty good. So we'll be pleased to get that fully put orange and then get it ready to accept its backpack so I can get it off of that, put either the fire moth on this or just another mech on it, maybe the shadow cat, make use of it some more. But yeah, I'm just pleased to have found a color I like. I have a whole headcanon for my own DIY force, but I won't bore you with the specifics here. Um, but I like doing that type of stuff. Anyways, pretty decent progress, all things considered. Kind of not impromptu. I wanted to do this on a Saturday versus a Sunday, but a little impromptu because I had to get this set up to where we have it. It's not perfect yet. It's never going to be perfect, but I still have to organize things, move things around, clean things up. But it was serviceable enough to get to doing this, and I'm really pleased with the result because while I do get stuff off camera a bunch, I can work this close and I'm not in the frame to block things. My hands are. So I just really like this setup. It's a lot better than what I had. It just took time to get here. So, yeah, that's this C3 stream. Chill Chat Create. If you made it this far, watching it post liveness in the archives, I suppose, subscribe, notification stuff, so you'll be notified when I do go live. I do video games and this. This has so far been once a week. I might step it up into some of my non Mech Warriorness days, depending upon what's going on. I just don't know yet, but it's getting there. So share your thoughts, questions, comments, whatever else. Stay tuned for uploads, and thanks so much for potentially stopping by in the future. Right? A view is always appreciated. A comment even way more so, and if you hit that free subscribe button, that's amazing. But to wrap things up, bases for the stuff that I want to actively work on without adding more to the pile are now in their brown stage, which basically means the bases have their modeling flock on them and now they are sealed with brown paint. So I can go back in, do some minor dry brushing, whatever it is, get it set up for accepting some experimentation to try and get a weird type of alien dirt deserty feel. At the same time, not of this earth because we're on some other planet. So yeah, food for thought. Anyways, that's that. Didn't do much with the 28mm scaled, which is 1/60th scaled shadow cat here. A little bit of panel scraping, panel line rescraping to make it sharper. We'll be figuring out which of these grays is going to be the main color versus the rosette coloration, and then it's going to be a whole lot more base coating. I primered, then it's going to be basing. So yeah, that's all I got for you on this one. More videos to come, so stay tuned, and until then, take care.